You want to make sure that your article, your research is, you determine ahead of time, is this an excellent article that you're going to publish, or is this a poor one? And if it is a poor one, then my personal advice would be to say, leave it, try and find something that, and be honest to yourself. Is this going to really change your research field, or is this a small contribution? If it is a small contribution, you might consider not publishing it yet and finding something that is worth really trying to publish in the international market. So, you have determined that you're ready to publish. If you want to publish, then you have to make sure that you are publishing in a certain, you're publishing in a certain field, so then you should look at it in this way. So are you presenting something new, something original, a new method perhaps in your field? Or are you rationalizing, are you refining something, or reinterpreting something that has already been published? Or are you reviewing, surveying your field? These are, of course, three very different types of publications, and you have to keep this in mind. But that's fine. If this is one of these, then you're ready, to look at how to publish. Make sure that, of course, the manuscript that you're publishing is very strong, and that it has, it does not just report on something that's not really scientifically interesting, but it has to be something new and exciting. So what is a strong manuscript? Novel, I would say, it has to be clear, it has to be useful for your research field, and of course it has to be an exciting message. And I don't mean exciting message in very colorful, but it has to be something that everybody's going to really think, wow, this person did this. I really want to read this because I want to make sure that my research is also followed up on this. So it has to be presented in a logical manner, and I will give you the steps to logically construct your manuscript. It has to be easily understood, not only by other researchers, but certainly by the editors and reviewers that are going to receive your manuscript. If they receive a manuscript that is not clear why this research is being sent to them, they will very likely reject it and say, okay, thank you very much, go find another journal to publish this in. We're not interested. Editors and reviewers, like you, are all very busy, so don't waste their time, and make sure that what you are sending is going to be of importance and is going to be interesting to them. There's types of manuscripts, so full-length articles, contributions. There's also letters and rapid communications, and letters and rapid communications are the type of manuscript where you're quickly trying to get all your peers to hear about something new, something that is novel, something that is that you want to share quickly with them. But it's going to be a very short article. And then, of course, the reviews and perspectives or surveys, those are looking at the field and they are evaluating what has already happened. So they're more of in a historical manner, if you will. So when you think of these three types of manuscripts, make sure that you ask yourself this: is it sufficient for a full-length article? Or if it's so thrilling, then you should be looking at publishing it as a letter. And by all means, and I cannot say this often enough, ask your supervisor or ask your peers what they think of this as well. Share your research. Make sure that they are looking at this as well, because they're going to be possibly more objective than you are about your research. Then identifying the right audience for your paper. You want to make sure that when you are writing your paper that you're writing it to the right audience, so that you know that this is the type of way that is communicated and that is usual. And if you do that, then the editor certainly and the reviewers are also going to be are going to understand much easier what research you have done. Choosing the right journal. Well, a lot of people think, oh yeah, I want to publish in the top journals in my field. That's great. Everybody does. But be realistic about your findings and your research. As a young researcher, don't get me wrong, it is possible, but it's going to be very, very hard to publish in the top journals in your field. And if you do it this way, you submit first to the top journals in your field, they're going to reject you most of the time because your research might be of importance to you, but it might not be of global importance in such a general journal, because of course they receive thousands and thousands of submissions every year. However, there's of course field-specific journals, journals that are more focused on a specific area of research, the area that you are working in. Look at those carefully. There's also other field-specific journals that might not be the top ones, but are still of very good quality. And then there are a lot of more national journals, and I say national in the sense that they might be regional, so they might be looking at regional problems and solutions, or they might be local language, or a combination of both. But make sure that you understand in which part of this pyramid your research lies, and be realistic. So when you choose a journal, look at the aims and scope, for example. This is a journal that I publish, and it has a nice overview of all the different areas that this journal looks at, and that the articles that are already published in this journal are also seen. You can get a very good feel of whether this would be the right journal for your paper to be published in. And once again, ask your supervisor, ask your colleagues for advice. One very important way of finding the right outlet for your research is to look at the references that you have used, because you're going to use particular references from particular journals, and likely these journals are going to be the ones that are going to want to look at your research once again, because you're improving on it, or you are finding new things in this area. So look at your references as well as a way of evaluating whether this is the right journal to publish in. This is a little bit of an ethics issue. Don't submit your article to more than one journal at a time. It is only after the journal says yes or no, and if it says yes, then you're delighted and you can publish it there. If it says no, then you can go ahead and try and submit elsewhere. Don't submit to more than one journal at the same time. Likely, the editor or the reviewers is going to know that you have submitted to another journal, and especially reviewers will find out, especially in the more specific areas, because most editors will likely use the same reviewers. So the reviewer will receive your manuscript from 2 or 3 locations at the same time, and you say, I've already received this from Journal A, and now I'm receiving it from Journal B. Oh, well, nobody likes this, because you're wasting their time basically by not being ethical about the way you submit your article. Okay, I think I can safely say that everybody eats a lot of fish in Thailand, so I think this is a nice picture. What it shows is, this is the head of your research article, of course. This is your advertising for your article. Then this is the main body, where all the meat is of what you have been doing, your research. And then finally, the tail is all the extra bits that need to be added in order to make sure that the right people are acknowledged, but also, of course, the right articles that you have been using in your research are also acknowledged. Do remember, journal space is not unlimited. Even in a digital era where everything is published electronically, you want to make sure that your article is as compact as possible. So if it can be, you know, if it is 20 pages now, if you can reduce it to 15 pages, it's better. It's not something that the publisher really wants, but it's definitely something that the research community wants, because if the paper is shorter, it is easier for people to likely understand and therefore absorb in their own research. So, we saw this slide, and it starts with title, abstract, and so forth, and then finally the conclusions and so forth. Here, you start first, of course, with your research, so your tables, your data, all the things that you've been doing. Then you start creating, describing methods, the results, and discussing those. So you're going bottom up in order to write your article. From there you go to the conclusion and the introduction, interesting enough. And then you look at the front matter, so the title, the abstract, the keywords, and so forth. Because those are the ones that are going to advertising. They're going to be the ones that people will search on. A question I get quite often is, so, I submit my article to you, do you correct my language? And the answer is no. Publishers do not correct language. Why? Because scientific language is something that is specific to each field. So the more descriptive a field is, the more likely if somebody changes something in the text, it's going to change the nature and it's going to change the article in general. So just a simple sentence might become something that is completely different and is not correct research. Do make sure that the article you submit is in the best possible shape, language-wise as well, so that people can easily understand what you have researched and why you're trying to publish. However, we do have some services that you can look at from Elsevier, and each publisher, I think, in the world will have some such types of services. But I would also advise that you try and find someone that is an expert in the field, in your field, that is fluent in English, if you need some assistance. And sometimes your co-author, if this person is in fact a native English speaker, will also, of course, be helping on this. So try and find some people around you to help you as well, to make sure that the grammar and everything is corrected in the article. Scientific language is very specific. It's not like writing a novel, of course. You want to make sure that you write with clarity, and with clarity I mean that nothing is ambiguous, so it can be misinterpreted. That you write with objectivity, so you're not giving your personal opinions here. You're not saying, oh, this is great or this is really bad. No, you're just stating the facts. You're writing with accuracy, so it must be correct and complete what you're writing. And you're writing with brevity, so don't avoid repetition. And this is why I also say that if you can write your article in 15 pages instead of 20, please do so. Or in 10 pages instead of 20. The shorter it is, the more concise it is, the more likely it will be published as well. So some of the key errors that you want to avoid here. think it's a nice little list. Use English correctly, of course, this is very straightforward. Check your grammar and punctuation so that that people will not misread your sentences. And construct them simply and clearly, and make sure that you construct very short sentences as well. Why this is so important? If you are writing something abstract, it needs very precise writing. You're not writing a poem, you're not writing a romance novel. It cannot be 400 pages, it has to be very concise. And it's very abstract, so keep your reader in mind as well. Because, of course, you are writing this and you are talking to your reader, however, you don't get to meet this person. This person might be somewhere in Argentina, for example, and it's not very efficient to pick up the phone and say, "Hi, I've just read your article, but I don't understand this. Can you give me more details?" You have to make sure that even though you're not there, your reader is understanding what you meant. And once again, no one wants to read pages and pages of formulae, but also of any descriptive text if it is already been written. So this goes back to the brevity of the article. Why is language important? Once again, nobody wants to guess what you're saying. This is a complaint from an editor, and this is a real complaint, and he says, here I'm spending my time trying to understand this submission. They can't just submit garbage. I think that's a little harsh to say that. And my rule of thumb is that if there's more than 6 grammatical errors in the abstract, then we will reject the paper outright. I understand that this can be quite shocking for an author, because the author has all the best intentions, but the editor doesn't really care. He or she just wants to see the best possible research and understand it immediately. So he says, don't waste my time. Wow. Sentences in scientific language. Be direct and have short sentences. Each sentence should contain just one idea or piece of information. This is an example of one sentence. This is one very long sentence with many, many, many ideas. Try and read it. I certainly cannot, because it has so many different things included in it that I don't think it will make sense to anybody reading it. Whether you're a native English speaker or not, it's not going to make sense. Authorship. This is something that some people don't quite understand, why one person is an author and another isn't. So, for example, you're working with 5 people, and each of them contributes on a regular basis to research and to the writing of the article, then yes, they are all 5 authors. However, if somebody comes into during your experiment and says, "Oh, that looks interesting, maybe we should change that," and then goes out, that is not an author. That is somebody that maybe would receive an acknowledgement for his or her contribution, but it's not an author. This is not an author. This is not somebody that has done a major part of the work. So, there is policies regarding authorship, which they're generally set up in the Vancouver group, and really what they state is what I just said. Substantial contribution. The draft or the revised of the article is actually also looked at by all these authors. They are all responsible for this, not just one author. And they all have to give their approval to the final manuscript. Remember that nobody says, "Oh, but I didn't get to see the final version before it was sent." I'll have to look at it and I'll say, yes, this is the final version before it gets submitted. And if all 3 conditions are met, then it is fine. And if not, They are acknowledged individuals. And I will get into a little bit more about this, who you should acknowledge and who you should not. The order of authorship, this is a general, this just gives you a general picture. So there's a first author, and this person supervises the whole process and so forth, and puts the paper together. And then there's a corresponding author, the one that talks to the editor or the reviewers, and if there is any discussion needed. Of course, there's abuses of this. Ghost authors where maybe somebody was an author, but they're not included in the paper. So they're a ghost author. That's not very nice, because they were doing the research just as much as you were. Gift authors are those that receive the authorship even though they haven't actually done anything. And this is quite common in certain cultures to say, oh well, Professor so-and-so taught me, so therefore I will give him or her credit to this, and will also list them as a gift author. This is not appropriate. They have to do the research, they have to be involved in the making of the manuscript from start to finish. Now we get into more of the construction of the article, the title. So a title should be as short and informative as possible. And effective titles identify the topic of the paper. They are accurate and unambiguous and complete, of course. They don't use strange abbreviations that nobody has ever heard of. And they should be short and catchy. So a guideline I would like to give to you is that an article does not exceed one line. Of course, some do, but try and be as concise with your title as well. Some examples here. Some of the things you should avoid is preliminary observations on blah blah blah, or partial results towards a proof. Don't say this because that's not necessary in the title. Just state the topic and just be accurate. Here's a title where there's all these strange abbreviations and so forth that nobody understands unless you actually read the article or you know what the author is doing their research on because you happen to be their colleague directly next door. So don't do this. And some of the catchy titles that I asked one of my editors to come up with, he said, okay, paths, trees, and flowers. This is from combinatorics, and this is something very specific. And you think, paths, trees, and flowers, but this is surely not mathematics. Well, yes it is, because paths and trees are actually terms used in combinatorics, and the flowers were actually something that he included in his article as a descriptive measurement. Then a method in graph theory, very short and snappy. And then there's omega, delta, and chi, which of course are terms used in mathematics as well, which also describe exactly what this article is about. Having said this, you can go overboard and say mangoes and blueberries. Now, if you were not familiar with the work that Bruce Reed in this case did, you would never understand why he's using this. I still don't understand it either myself. And packing seagulls was an inside joke that these two authors were using. This is too short, this is not descriptive, it's not going to mean anything to anybody except to these two authors that probably had a really good laugh about this when they came up with this title. Then you get into the abstract. So you've got your title, and you have your abstract. So the most important findings have to be in the abstract. It's an ad for your article. It's an ad for your article not only on in the journal, but also, of course, in the abstracting and indexing databases. They will pick up on this. So a clear abstract will really influence whether you also get accepted, because, of course, the editor and later on the reviewers are going to understand why they should be looking at this paper and why they should be evaluating and finding whether it should be published in their journal. So this shows what has been done, and this part of the abstract shows what the main findings are. Also note that the abstract is just one paragraph. It's very concise. Keywords. Keywords are once again also used in indexing and abstracting, and they're of course labels. Just like your abstract and your title are used, the keywords are also used as labels for your article. Check the guidelines at the Guide for Authors on what keywords are used for that particular journal. Sometimes they are specific to to an area, or sometimes they are specific to a journal. And once again, you can use only established abbreviations. Don't use abbreviations that nobody knows or that are not commonly used. Article title that I think displays this very nicely. Silent music and silent quake. Granular flow induced vibration. So the keywords here are not only the ones that are used in the article title, of course, but also on more specifics in the article itself. And then you get into introduction. So this is where you're trying to convince your reader that your work is relevant to your area. And so you go from very general, what is the problem, existing solutions and so forth, to very specific. So it gets put into a funnel basically. What are you hoping to achieve in this article? Methods. Now, methods and experiments, they include only the most important details. Don't repeat what has already been done, or what is not a major method or experiment in your research. If it is appropriate, please use the vendor names and so forth that you used. All the chemicals that are used in your experiment should be identified. Proper control experiments should be presented, and so forth. Write this in the past tense. I think this is because you already did the experiment. And this is what people like to hear, because then they can understand that this has been done, instead of this is not what you're doing right now. And of course, consider supplementary material so that you avoid having a lot of this section being too large, really, because supplementary material can also be video and audio and so forth. And I think everybody likes to see something that you don't have to describe in video or audio as well. Ethics committee approval you have to get, of course, for any experiments with humans or animals. Make sure you get this in writing and you get their approval. And then the editors can make their own decisions whether it was ethically done or not. They might actually still consider some of the things that, even if you receive the ethical approval, they might still question them. So then you go from the methods and experiments into the results. So what have you found? Please include the main findings. So not all findings, but just the main findings that you think are the most important to include in your article. And highlight how they are different from the findings of the previous researchers, or maybe work you previously did yourself. And the results, of course, also have to be statistically analyzed. Figures and tables that you might use in your results. Illustrations are, of course, critical, but make sure that they capture what you're trying to say, and that they're also captions so that people can understand where the figure fits in the text. You still have to describe what the figure means in the text as well, of course. Appearance does count. If you look here, this is published in an English language journal, and still it uses this, I think, Chinese characters to describe whatever this is. I don't know what it is actually. Here, I hope you can see this. It notes that there is something going on here, drug crystals. However, it's so incredibly unclear that nobody's going to understand why this figure is used, this picture. So use color perhaps here to illustrate this, but only use it when necessary. Don't use color just because it looks pretty. Use color only if it illustrates something more clearly. And yes, don't include long and boring tables because nobody's going to look at them and they're just going to fill space. Then you get into discussion. So what do your results actually mean? Check for the following, and do the results actually relate to the original question asked? Sometimes they might not. Sometimes the results go into a completely different direction. Do it provide an interpretation of each result? And are the results consistent with what other investigators in your area have reported? Or are they different? Because that could be very exciting actually to report on. Don't make statements that are not part of your experiment, or that where you also introduce new terms or ideas. So please stick to what you have been researching and what your results come up with. Conclusions. So present the global and the specific conclusions, and indicate also what possible extensions can be made on this. Suggest the future experiments, for example, and maybe you are already working on this. Let people know. Don't summarize the paper. You have that is what the abstract is for. And don't make judgments on the impact. Don't say, this is the biggest thing since we invented the wheel. Wow, you know, this is going to make a huge impact, and everybody should know about this. This is major science. People will know whether it is or it is not major science. Acknowledgements. Now, instead of the authorship, this is where you section where you acknowledge those people that have given you ideas, have contributed in some way, but are not responsible for the actual research and the writing of the paper. This is where you also include your advisors if necessary, your proofreaders, maybe typists that you use, and financial supporters if relevant, and so on. References. Make sure that you get your references right. I say here that referencing should be in the style of the journal, but I would say it's more important to be very concise in your referencing. So always use the same referencing style, because nowadays most publishers will then adapt your references and make sure that they are according to that standard of the journal. But just as long as you're always making your references in the same way, then it's going to be fine. Don't use at all. Make in your references, you have to list all of the authors in a particular paper. And be consistent. This is, I think, the most important thing. If you can, please avoid anything that has to do with personal communications or unpublished observations, or possibly articles published in local language. I say that because the readers that look at the references are not going to be able to access these materials likely. If they are of real importance, then please do include them, but if, especially local language, if you can find a reference that is written in English somewhere else, then please use that instead so that people will understand why you're referencing this particular source. Supplementary material. It is important, but it is data of secondary importance. So it just supports what you have already included as data in your manuscript, but it's not groundbreaking, if you will. It just supports it in some way or another. And you can also include audio and video here, which will be very nice for people to use as well. It won't be part of the printed article, of course, especially audio and video is not possible in print, but it will be available online via the publisher, and it's always appreciated by the readers. But remember, it must always relate and support the article in the end. This is an idea of the suggested lengths of each part of the article. Don't take this as the only length, because each journal will say we prefer to have, or we only accept articles that are shorter than 20 pages, or 30 pages, or what have you, or 10 pages, or 5 pages even. So this is just an idea of how long certain parts of your article can or should be. Your letters and short communications are, of course, much stricter, and they're likely to have maybe even 2 pages or 5 pages of published material. Abbreviations. The first time you use an abbreviation, you have to define it completely. So when you, even if it is used in the abstract, please redefine it in the main body or part of your article. And after that, you can use it, of course, as an abbreviation in the rest of your article. Don't identify abbreviations if you're going to use them only once, then it defeats the purpose, I think. And avoid acronyms if possible. It can be lab jargon, if you will, but it's not going to be understood by anybody outside of your specific community within the university, for example. Abbreviations have to be firmly established in order to be, that don't need to be defined, of course, like DNA, PDA, PDE, it's fixed. Try to make your first submission as successful as possible, and I should not stress enough that this means that you have to write, and then rewrite, and then rewrite your article again in order to get it in the best possible shape before you submit it. Some suggestions: after you have written your paper, you finish this, just leave it on the, put it aside for a couple of days, let it sit there, and then look back again and reread it with fresh eyes. Reread it with a new view, basically. And of course, then you have to rewrite it because you'll see some of the inconsistencies and some of the things that might actually be ambiguous in your paper. And of course, ask your colleagues and supervisors to read this with you and to give you suggestions. I mean, they're invaluable. They're almost like reviewers for you in that sense. So you've done that. You've written and rewritten your article again. Before you submit it, you tend to write a cover letter. And I say tend because some journals don't require a cover letter, but they ask in the submission process that you write a short note to the editor in the system that they're using. So this is the chance really for you to speak directly to the editor, whether it's in a cover letter or in this electronic submission system. this is also the time to say, yes, I am a PhD student, and I would really appreciate you looking at this carefully, because this could mean that I will actually get my PhD next year if it gets published. So it's submitted along with your manuscript, and do mention what makes the manuscript special to the journal. So say, I used your journal because this really contributes more to the research you have already published and so forth. Special requirements, so sometimes you can suggest reviewers here that the editor can use for your paper. And sometimes the journal will ask for this. Remember that if you suggest reviewers, either the editor will actually use these and say, thank you very much, great, I'm going to send your paper to these reviewers. Or the other way is he or she will say, ah, great, these are your friends? I will not send it to these people for review. So this is a cover letter which shows that final approval was received by all of the authors for this manuscript, as is required. The explanation of the importance of the research is given, and here this corresponding author has given 3 reviewers that this editor might look at. So, you've submitted. Oh dear. I don't want to scare you here, but this is probably what it feels like to you as authors. You know. To give you an idea of what happens, instead of this picture where it just feels like everybody's against you and nobody wants to see your research published, this gives you an idea of what happens. So you as an author submit the paper, and it is looked at by the editor whether it meets all the basic requirements. So all the bits and pieces are there, everything that the method and the figures and everything is there for the editor to evaluate your paper. It might also, the basic requirements might also be that it is in fact within the aims and scope of the journal. Sometimes people submit to a journal that is really not relevant for their research. So this is what the editor also looks at. And if this is not met, then it's rejected. And basically you're left to start over the whole process again. However, if the basic requirements are met, then the editor will likely submit either to somebody from the editorial board, so an associate editor, or assign directly reviewers to your article. And reviewers, some journals in different fields, it differs how many reviewers look at your paper. So, for example, I know in some of the life sciences, maybe up to 6 or 7 reviewers will look at a paper, whereas in, let's say, physical sciences, it's common to have 2, maybe 3 reviewers at the most. And within mathematics, sometimes just 1 reviewer looks at the paper. So it's sent to the reviewer, and the reviewer hopefully will say, yes, I will review this paper. Sometimes they will say, I don't have the time, or it's not relevant to me, and send it back. But if they say yes, then they will give recommendations. And then the editor collects all these recommendations and makes a decision. Sometimes the recommendations are collected and the editor's decision is go ahead and revise this paper. It's worth our time to look at again, but it is